Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. I never thought I'd have to fight for something that was already mine, but when a corrupt HOA tried to steal my grandfather's lake cabin with fake paperwork and intimidation, they learned the hard way. I don't back down. This is the story of how I took on the rich, the powerful, and won. My name is Travis Red Coldstone, and this is the story of how I nearly lost my grandfather's lake cabin to a bunch of rich, entitled bastards who thought they could take whatever they wanted. The cabin wasn't just a piece of property to me. It was my history, my sanctuary. My grandfather built it back in 1957 with his own two hands using wood. He cut himself and nails he hammered in under the summer sun. He and my grandmother spent every summer here, raising my dad and my uncles to love the land, respect the lake, and live simply. When my grandfather passed, my dad inherited the place, and when Dad was gone, it became mine. It wasn't much, just a small two-bedroom log cabin nestled among the towering pines on the western shore of Blackwood Lake. The air smelled like damp earth and pine resin, and the water was always crisp, even in the peak of summer. This place was home, even if I didn't live here full-time. I spent my weekends fishing, chopping wood, sitting by the fire with a cold beer, and listening to the sounds of the forest. Then the developers came. I should have known trouble was brewing when I first saw the signs go up down the road. Silver Pines Estates, luxury lakeside living. Huge billboards featuring grinning families standing in front of their multi-million-dollar mansions. I watched as crews tore through the woods, flattening everything in their path to make room for their monstrosities, gleaming, soulless, glass and stone monstrosities that had no business standing next to my grandfather's rustic haven. At first, I ignored them. Let the rich folks have their playground. I had my cabin, my land, my peace. But peace doesn't last when greed comes knocking. One crisp autumn morning, I drove up to the cabin, looking forward to a quiet weekend. As I pulled into my driveway, something immediately felt off. Two men in polo shirts and dress pants were wandering around my property, measuring distances with laser devices and scribbling notes on their clipboards. One of them, a tall man with graying hair and an artificial tan, glanced up as I stepped out of my truck. He smiled, the kind of smile that wasn't friendly. It was the kind of smile a car salesman gives when he's about to rip you off. "Good morning. You must be the owner," he said, walking toward me like we were old friends. "I'm Walter Grayson, president of the Silver Pines Homeowners Association, and this is Mr. Jeffries, our compliance inspector." I narrowed my eyes. "Compliance inspector? For what?" Grayson chuckled, flipping through the papers on his clipboard. "Oh, just routine assessments. Your property technically falls within our newly extended jurisdiction, so we're making sure everything aligns with the Silver Pines architectural and environmental standards." I stared at him, my stomach twisting. "This isn't part of your development," I said flatly. Grayson tilted his head like he was talking to a slow child. "Well, actually, according to our updated survey records, it is. But don't worry, we're here to help. You'll just need to make a few updates, fresh paint, proper landscaping, and, of course, your cabin will need to be brought up to HOA standards." I clenched my fists. This cabin was built in 1957. It doesn't need to meet your damn standards. Grayson's smile didn't waver. "Well, that's not exactly up to you anymore. But I understand your frustration. You'll be receiving official documentation soon. Just know that we're more than happy to assist you in making the transition smooth and painless." I stepped forward, closing the space between us. "Get off my land." Grayson let out a small laugh, shaking his head. "There's no need to be hostile, Mr. Coldstone. We'll be in touch." I stood there, my blood boiling, as they walked back to their sleek black SUV, chatting casually, like they hadn't just tried to tell me my own home didn't belong to me anymore. I didn't know it then, but that was just the beginning. They weren't done with me, not by a long shot. At first, I wanted to believe it was just a mistake. Maybe a bureaucratic mix-up, some real estate red tape that would get sorted out once they realized I wasn't part of their fancy new development. But deep down, I knew better. The first official letter arrived 3 days later. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope stamped with the logo of the Silver Pines Homeowners Association, HOA. I tore it open and scanned the pages, my hands tightening into fists as I read. "Dear Mr. Coldstone, As a property owner within the newly established jurisdiction of Silver Pines Estates, you are now subject to the community guidelines and regulations as outlined in our HOA agreement. Violations on your property include unauthorized exterior paint color must comply with HOA-approved palettes. Lack of landscaping maintenance, grass must be kept under 2 inches. Non-compliant structure, your log cabin does not meet the architectural standards for the community. In order to avoid penalties, please submit plans for compliance within 30 days. Failure to do so will result in escalating fines and possible legal action. Sincerely, Walter Grayson, HOA President. My blood ran cold. They weren't just pushing boundaries. They were trying to take my home. I crumpled the letter and threw it into the fireplace, but I knew burning their bullshit threats wouldn't make them go away. The next morning, I drove straight to the county assessor's office. The guy at the desk, a tired-looking clerk named Howard, adjusted his glasses and pulled up the records. I leaned over the counter as he scanned the screen. "Tell me my land isn't part of Silver Pines," I said, my voice tense. Howard frowned, tapping at the keyboard. Then, after a long pause, he sighed. "Well, according to the records, the boundaries were updated 2 months ago." My jaw tightened. "What do you mean, updated?" He turned the monitor toward me. There it was, my land, my grandfather's land, now marked as part of Silver Pines Estates. The boundaries had been redrawn, and my property was absorbed into their jurisdiction without my consent. I slammed my fist on the counter, making Howard jump. "This is illegal," I growled. Howard raised his hands defensively. "I don't disagree with you, Mr. Coldstone, but if they filed the paperwork properly, it's going to take a court challenge to reverse it. And that's not going to be cheap." I muttered a curse under my breath and stormed out. By the time I got back to my cabin, my frustration had turned into rage. I wasn't going to let some rich assholes steal my home with paperwork tricks and legal loopholes. I grabbed my phone and called Cheryl Marsh, my cousin and one of the best real estate attorneys in the state. She picked up after the second ring. "Travis, what's up?" "I need your help," I said, gripping the phone tightly. "Some HOA bastards are trying to take my land. They faked boundary records. What can we do?" There was a pause. Then she exhaled. "Send me everything. I'll look into it. But if they pulled this off legally, we're in for a fight." A fight was exactly what I was ready for. That same night, I installed security cameras around the property. If these people were planning anything shady, I wanted proof. And it didn't take long to catch them in the act. At 2:37 a.m., my motion sensor went off. My phone buzzed, alerting me to movement outside. I tapped the security feed and saw 3 men in dark clothing sneaking around my property. They were taking photos, measuring things. One of them, a bald guy with a clipboard, started hammering a notice of violation onto my front door. I grabbed my shotgun. I didn't load it. I wasn't looking to kill anyone, but I wasn't about to let these snakes slither around my home in the middle of the night like they own the place. I threw open the front door, cocked the shotgun, and stepped onto the porch. "Get the hell off my property!" I roared. The 3 men froze. One of them, the bald guy, dropped his clipboard and raised his hands. Whoa, no need for that. We're just enforcing HOA compliance." "You're trespassing." I cut him off, my voice sharp. "And if you don't leave in the next 5 seconds, I'm calling the sheriff." The bald guy swallowed. His 2 friends were already backing toward the trees. All right, we're leaving," he stammered, stepping back. "But you'll regret this." I watched them disappear into the woods, my hands shaking with adrenaline. Then I grabbed the notice they'd nailed to my door. Final warning: failure to comply will result in escalating fines and legal action. These people weren't stopping, but neither was I. The next morning, I was sipping my coffee on the porch when I heard the low hum of an approaching engine. A sleek black SUV rolled up my driveway and came to a slow stop. The door opened, and out stepped none other than Walter Grayson, dressed in his usual pressed slacks and button-down shirt. His expression was smug, like a man who thought he already won. I set my mug down on the porch railing, keeping my stance relaxed. I wasn't going to let him see me sweat. "Morning, Mr. Coldstone," he said, flashing that same condescending grin. I crossed my arms. "What the hell do you want now?" Grayson didn't react to my hostility. Instead, he pulled a thick folder from under his arm and started flipping through the pages. "I wanted to give you one last opportunity to do this the easy way," he said, pausing as if to let his words sink in. You see, your property is now officially under Silver Pines Estate's jurisdiction, which means you are required to follow our guidelines. And, well, you're in violation of quite a few of them. He handed me a list of violations, pages of legal jargon, each violation carrying an absurd fine. Unauthorized structure, $10,000 fine. Failure to comply with landscaping regulations, $2,500 fine. Non-conforming exterior design, $5,000 fine. Unregistered private well, $3,000 fine. The list went on. The total amount? Over $30,000. I let out a short laugh and tossed the papers onto the porch. You think I'm just going to roll over and start writing checks? I said, shaking my head. You're out of your damn mind. Grayson sighed, as if he were genuinely disappointed. I was afraid you'd say that, he said, sliding the folder back under his arm. That's why the HOA board has decided to move forward with the next step. I raised an eyebrow. What step? Grayson motioned toward the road. I turned just in time to see a work truck pull up, hauling a sign the size of a billboard. They were putting up a for sale sign. On my land. Before I could react, two workers hopped out of the truck and started hammering the sign into the ground at the edge of my driveway. The bold letters read, "Future site of a Silver Pines clubhouse, coming soon." Rage burned through my veins like wildfire. I stomped toward the workers, my fists clenched. "Get that damn thing off my land," I bellowed. One of the workers flinched but kept hammering. "We're just following orders, sir." I turned back to Grayson, who was watching me like a man enjoying a show. "You son of a bitch," I growled. Grayson just smirked. "You see, Mr. Coldstone, we have very powerful attorneys on retainer," he said smoothly. "If this goes to court, it could take years to sort out. Years of legal fees, time wasted, and let's be honest, you're just one man. The HOA has resources. You don't." I clenched my jaw. "So, let me make this easy for you," he continued. "Sell the land, walk away with a generous offer, and avoid a very, very expensive legal battle." I stepped forward, getting right up in his smug face. "You don't get it, do you?" I said, my voice low. "This isn't just land to me. This is my home, and I don't give a damn how many lawyers you have. I'm not selling." Grayson's smile finally faltered. "Suit yourself," he muttered, straightening his tie. "But you'll regret this." He turned and walked back to his SUV. I watched as the workmen finished hammering in the sign, then hopped back in their truck and sped off. I stood there, fists shaking, staring at the blatant declaration of war they had just planted on my land. Fine, if they wanted a fight, I'd give them one. That night, I wasn't sleeping. I kept my rifle loaded and within reach. My security cameras were on high alert, motion sensors set up around the property. At 2:15 a.m., the cameras caught movement again. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the feed. Two men dressed in black creeping toward my porch. One of them had a can of spray paint. I didn't hesitate. I stormed outside, shotgun in hand. "Freeze!" I roared. The two men jerked to a halt, one of them dropping the spray can. I didn't point the gun directly at them, but I let them see it. One of them took off running immediately, bolting into the trees. The other hesitated until I took a step forward. "I said freeze," I barked, but he turned and bolted after his friend. I wasn't about to chase them into the woods. Instead, I snapped photos from my security feed and called the sheriff. Sheriff Bill Carter was an old friend of my dad's. He arrived in 10 minutes flat, took one look at the sign, the security footage, and my front door, which had been spray painted with the words "Get Out," and let out a long sigh. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered, shaking his head. "You think?" I said. He scratched his beard. "Listen, Red, these HOA guys, they play dirty. Real dirty. But I can tell you this, trespassing, vandalism, that's a crime, and I don't give a damn how rich they are." I nodded. "Can you do anything?" Bill exhaled. "I'll start an official investigation, but if you want to win this, you're gonna need more than me. You need to take this fight to them legally." I already knew that. I called Cheryl first thing in the morning. "We need to go after them," I told her. Her response, "Then let's burn them to the ground." The gloves were off. I wasn't just fighting for my land anymore. I was fighting to bring these bastards down. After Sheriff Carter officially opened an investigation into Silver Pines HOA, I knew things were about to escalate even further. And I was right. 2 days after the sheriff's visit, I drove up to my cabin and felt my stomach drop. The front door was wide open. I threw the truck into park and bolted up the steps, my heart pounding in my chest. The place had been ransacked, cabinets thrown open, drawers emptied, my grandfather's old rifle missing from the mantel. On the wall, in huge red spray paint, was a message. "This isn't your home anymore." I gritted my teeth so hard my jaw ached. I'd had enough. I pulled out my phone and called Sheriff Carter. "I need you here, now." By the time the sheriff arrived, I was standing outside, shotgun in hand, scanning the tree line. I wasn't letting anyone else sneak up on me tonight. Carter took one look inside the cabin and let out a slow breath. Jesus, Red, they really did a number on this place. "No shit," I muttered. "This isn't vandalism anymore. This is a full-blown threat." Carter turned to one of his deputies. "Pull the security footage." The deputy nodded and got to work. Within minutes, we had clear footage from my outdoor cameras. 3 men wearing ski masks, forcing their way inside. But then we got lucky. One of them turned his head just enough to expose his face. It was Jeffries, the same HOA inspector who had been measuring my land weeks ago. Carter let out a low whistle. Well, looks like we've got ourselves a suspect. I cracked my knuckles. We're doing this my way. The next morning, I stormed into the Silver Pines HOA headquarters. It was a sleek, modern office building just outside the development, a place where rich men made backroom deals and decided who got to keep their homes and who didn't. I kicked open the door so hard the receptionist nearly jumped out of her chair. "Where's Grayson?" I demanded. She stammered, her hands trembling. "Sir, you can't just barge in." "I'm not asking." I shoved past her and marched straight into the main conference room, where Grayson and his board members were sitting around a long glass table. For the first time, his smug expression was gone. "Coldstone," he said, standing slowly. "This is a private meeting." I slammed the sheriff's search warrant onto the table. "Not anymore," I growled. "You see, Grayson, I got you on tape. Your boy Jeffries broke into my house last night, and that, my friend, is felony trespassing." One of the board members looked panicked. Grayson's jaw tightened. "You have no proof of HOA involvement." I leaned forward. "You really think Jeffries did this on his own? The same guy who was measuring my property for you?" I let out a laugh. "Nah, see, the sheriff's department doesn't believe in coincidences, and lucky for me, Carter is very interested in who gave him the orders." Silence. Grayson's face darkened. "This isn't over," he muttered. I grinned. "Oh, buddy. It is." Just then, the front doors burst open. 2 deputies walked in, flanking Sheriff Carter. Carter walked up to the table, adjusting his belt. "Walter Grayson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit felony trespassing, harassment, and attempted property fraud." Grayson's face turned red as a beet. "You can't do this," he barked. Carter smirked. "I think I just did." The deputies yanked him up from his chair, slapped cuffs on his wrists, and led him out the door. The room was dead silent as I turned to the remaining board members. I leaned over the table, staring them down. "If any of you ever come near my land again," I said, my voice deadly calm, "I promise you, Grayson's fate will look like a slap on the wrist." No one spoke. I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving them to drown in their own fear. Later that night, I sat on my porch, watching the sun dip behind the treetops. I took a slow sip of whiskey, breathing in the scent of pine and fresh air. The nightmare was over. Grayson was going to prison. His HOA empire was crumbling. And my land, still mine. They had tried to take everything from me, but they forgot one simple fact. I don't lose. Days following Grayson's arrest were a whirlwind of legal battles, news reports, and desperate attempts by the Silver Pines HOA to save face. But the damage was already done. The county prosecutor took one look at the evidence, security footage, fraudulent property records, and testimony from former homeowners they had scammed, and went after the entire HOA board. By the end of the week, 3 more members were arrested, including Jeffries, the inspector who had broken into my cabin. It turned out Grayson and his cronies had been running this scam for years, quietly absorbing old properties into their jurisdiction, slapping homeowners with fines and forcing them to sell at a loss. This time, they had messed with the wrong guy. The county judge ruled that my property had been illegally annexed into the HOA's territory. Not only was my land restored to its rightful independent status, but the HOA was ordered to pay restitution to me and to every other homeowner they had scammed. It was over. I had won. A month later, Silver Pines Estates was in shambles. Homeowners, now aware of the corruption, began pulling out of the development. Real estate values plummeted, and soon the luxury paradise Grayson had tried to build turned into an abandoned mess of half-sold houses and empty lots. With their leaders in jail, the HOA collapsed. They took their signs down, they removed their cameras, and the land once again belonged to the people who had been there before them. As for me, I spent my days doing what I had always done: fishing, chopping wood, enjoying the peace of the lake. One evening, as I sat on my porch, a familiar truck pulled up the driveway. Sheriff Carter stepped out, hands in his pockets, a grin on his face. "You actually did it," he said, shaking his head. "Damn right I did," he chuckled. "Well, you'll be happy to know Grayson took a plea deal. He won't be seeing daylight for a long time." I raised my glass of whiskey. "Good riddance." Carter nodded, then looked out at the lake. "You ever think about what would have happened if you just sold the land?" I exhaled, shaking my head. "I don't think about things that were never an option." He smirked. "That's why I knew you'd win." We sat there for a while, watching the sun set over Blackwood Lake, the water still and golden. I had fought for this land, and I had kept what was mine. The seasons changed, but my cabin by Blackwood Lake remained exactly as it had always been, untouched, quiet, and mine. Without the Silver Pines HOA breathing down everyone's necks, the lake community began to heal. The old-timers who had been bullied into submission took back their independence. Some who had been forced to sell reclaimed their land through legal settlements. The once grand plans for Silver Pines estates, dead. Most of the luxury houses sat empty, abandoned by buyers who wanted nothing to do with a failed development. Eventually, a smaller family-owned company took over the remaining lots, selling them to people who actually appreciated the lake instead of trying to own it. The land had won. And so had I. One crisp autumn morning, I was stacking firewood when I heard the sound of tires crunching down my gravel driveway. Cheryl stepped out of her car, sunglasses perched on her head, a self-satisfied grin on her face. "I hope you know you owe me at least 10 steak dinners for the legal hell I went through for you," she said, crossing her arms. I smirked. "I was thinking a bottle of whiskey and a weekend at the cabin," she laughed. "I'll take it." She walked up to the porch, looking around at the land. "You really did it, Red," she said. "Your grandfather would be proud." I looked out at the lake, calm and golden in the morning light. "He'd have fought the same fight," I said. "Probably would have done it with fewer lawyers and more shotgun shells." Cheryl chuckled. "Well, either way, you didn't just save your home. You saved this place for everyone." I nodded. That was the real victory. That night, I sat on the dock, my feet dangling just above the water. The sky was a deep, endless black, speckled with stars. The world had changed, but my cabin, my land, it was exactly as it should be. No HOA, no greedy developers, just the sounds of crickets, the distant call of an owl, and the gentle ripple of the lake. I took a slow sip of my whiskey and let out a breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. And I knew one thing for sure: no one would ever take this place from me again.